I'm Broken Stoic, and I'm here with Michelle Butler, and today we're going to talk about who she is, where she comes from, and how she got to be involved in so many amazing different projects. Michelle, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Okay, I guess I'll start with where I think we're going to start, and that's I started in the games industry in '99 with Sony Online Entertainment, but I actually had my own gaming store several years prior to that. I think we opened in 92, 93, 92, and wound up totally involved with EverQuest and Sony Online Entertainment and did a bunch of projects through EverQuest, through Sony. EverQuest Online Adventures, Free Roam, Star Wars Galaxies, a little bit of H1Z1, then later Vanguard Saga of Heroes. There's a big break in between. And then from Sony, I went to Sigil Games with Jeff Butler and worked on Heroes, Saga of Heroes, and then we sold back to Sony Online Entertainment. And so Jeff and I went back to Sony and I worked on Vanguard there for a while. Then I left there and went to Pixel Mage and worked with John Smedley. Then I went from Pixel Mage and I worked at Amazon Game Studios with John Smedley. And my end of January was my leaving and conclusion with Amazon Game Studios. So right now I'm taking a break.
Yeah, understandably so. You've been at it for quite a long time. That's quite a prestigious list of projects that you've worked on. What was your favorite one?
EverQuest Online Adventures.
And
close second to Star Wars Galaxies. But EQOA was a smaller team and we moved a lot of mountains. Not to say that EverQuest was not a lot of fun, but my favorite project was EQOA because the team wrote that from ground up.
are there any particular like memories or moments that really stick out to you that are very fond, or maybe not fond at all?
With EQOA or with career?
Yeah, with
Career-wise,
EQOA.
probably. Well, if we start with EQOA, launch day was quite interesting. We were all sitting there. EQOA launched with an adapter for the internet. So if you didn't have the adapter, which was sold separately, and you could generally only get it in game stores, and the entire guide program had to have the adapter to help us, and none of them had it.
Ooh.
Most of us didn't have it even at home, and we're like on the development team, and they undersold that component and over to how many games sold. So we're not getting real numbers because none of these people can log in because they don't have this internet connector because it was PlayStation 2, right? And so anyways, that was a whole nightmare that we went through. But once we started to realize that the game was going to be really successful, the team felt very rewarded. And we then launched the expansion, I think about a year or so later.
How
And
many
oddly
expansions
enough,
are there?
just the one,
Okay.
Frontiers. The third one, which would have been Underfoot, didn't launch. But oddly enough, EverQuest Online Adventures was set 500 years earlier than EverQuest. So although I worked on EverQuest first and EverQuest Online Adventures second, in the EverQuest realm, EQOA is 500 years earlier.
A prequel. Interesting. I
Yes,
actually, yeah,
so
I
very
hunted it
interesting.
down. Yeah, it is. It's really neat. I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna play it. I have all the stuff. I just need to do so.
And one of the best fun parts about doing EQOA was some of us were on the original EverQuest lore team. And we're here, but we'll go backwards to EverQuest. On EverQuest Online Adventures, many of us were on the lore team or designers or like customer service.
Mhm.
And we took things like Palace, which I designed in EQOA. I designed it from the ground up, wrote everything.
Wow.
Between Bill Coyle and I, we did something like 120 of the zones. And so Hallis, of course, is the starting city. So I did things like McPherson's Broken Bloody Blades was in original EverQuest, which is named after a guy named Kevin McPherson. But I went to Kevin and I was like, hey, tell me all about the history of McPherson Bloody Blades in EverQuest. Refresh my memory. So I took that information and much like Highlander characters, I drove it back 500 years, and it was like his 8th great grandfather that was opened it hundreds of years before the original EverQuest. And we tried to stay within great sync of EverQuest, but 500 years earlier.
That's
So there
really
were
complicated.
it was, but we had a blast doing it because we got to take lore that we all loved and reverse it by like 500 years. So think of any of your, like, I don't know if the Potter world had been around for 500 years, but think of taking those characters and reversing them, and you're now, half a century earlier,
Right. Yeah.
which made it a lot of fun. But it also gave us the ability to not affect characters that were like gods, like in the world. We all know them all, like Tunari.
Yep.
We could write things about that didn't affect the original EverQuest or wasn't told about the original EverQuest, but still use the same characters and some of the same personalities. They were just 5 generations earlier. Well, I guess 8 generations earlier. So it wound up very interesting. So the lay of the land and everything was kind of already set, and we just modified it to PlayStation 2, which was out at the time, and we took an MMO. It was the first MMO on any console,
On it,
and
yeah.
ported it over, which was also very challenging because nobody had done it before.
It's wild to think about because a lot of people don't understand. I mean, you're talking about a PlayStation 2. As you said, there had to be an adapter that was sold separately to attach to it just to connect. I mean,
Right.
everybody
You
who
had to
plays
connect to
games
the
today,
internet.
yeah, everything.
Yeah.
I mean, my vacuum cleaner will connect to the internet if I want it to. So
Yeah, but back then that wasn't the case.
exactly, which is a wild thing. And people are playing on their PlayStations on a dial-up connection.
Yeah.
Things are starting to transition maybe more into the cable modem style, but it's not, that's still very new and very edgy
Yeah.
technology at that time.
The entire creation of EQOA, all of the developers, we had a PC client. So all of the development work we did was actually through Excel. And Campaign Cartographer 2, if you remember D&D days,
I
our
do.
maps were Campaign Cartographer. And so we that's all the design that we did. We had one PlayStation that was a developer PlayStation, a PS2, because they weren't out yet. We had one set up in the area, and in order to port it from our PC to the PlayStation and test it, we would have to port it over, then reserve time on the PlayStation, go test our zone on the PlayStation, then come back and modify it on PC with whatever PC issues we had.
That
Yeah.
sounds terrible.
That's how we did it. We only had one.
The level of, or the feeling of success, though, once you got it right, must have been great. Oh my gosh, we can
It was.
finally move on to the next thing, and we can finally.
Still to this day, I have, as you know from interviews that you've seen, still to this day, the EQOA group that is on Facebook invite me to, invite all of us to every EverQuest, EQOA anniversary. They still talk about it. I still chat with the guys that are involved in it. Most of the team and I all, it's like Bill Coyle. I just literally 10 seconds ago got a Facebook response from Bill Coyle on something we were discussing. We lost an EverQuest co-worker. His name was Chris Hatch. We lost him like a week or so ago, and his memorial is coming up. So I'm helping set up and communicate with everybody that's flying in for that. Whole different topic, but anyways, so he and I are like communicating. He and I talk. The strange thing about everybody involved in, and I don't know if it's just this industry or just my world, but I can go like 2 or 3 years and not talk to a particular person, and you put us back in the same room, and it's just like we saw each other yesterday. Other than some of the spouses and kids and cats and dogs and job, there's nothing unchanged. The last interview Bill Coyle and I did, I don't know, I want to say about 6 months ago. He was like, let's chat for about an hour before we actually go on camera, and we did,
Yeah.
and it was just like, oh, hey, what are you doing? And we talked about Warhammer, and we talked about Bourbon Street, which was the Florida store, and just chat away, and it's just like no time passes. And you run across one of these individuals for whatever. Jeff was up at GDC and ran across one of our GMs, Jake Sones, who also worked on EQOA. And Jake and I were chatting back and forth, and it was just like, hey, how like no time had passed, which is the strangest thing for these kinds of relationships. But 30 years I've known these people.
It's a long time. Yeah, it's a long time to know somebody, but I do think that, I use the term forged in fire quite frequently, but I do think that you guys went through so many different things, trials and tribulations, because a lot of people don't understand, even on some of these comments that I made actually from the interview I did with Jeff. People will say like, well, they put this thing in the game, and if they put the thing in the game and it didn't work correctly, then that's on them. That's their fault. And it's like, no, these people like built the foundation in which that thing could even exist. At the time, it was like, how do we get this thing to work at all, let alone perfecting it and adding in all these checks and balances and things, like the limitations of technology at the time, the limitations of nobody had done it, so nobody really knew. You just talked about having to build things in an Excel sheet, and it's just it's a different
Well, there was a period of time. A period of time we would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner and midnight snacks for 3 days in a row with people. I'd be up at 4:30 in the morning getting Denny's food for the team because somebody had to eat, and I'd fill my entire car up with food from Denny's so that we could eat. There were days that we would spend, our typical day together was 12 hours a day. And we were in contact 24 hours a day. I had GMs that were online 24/7, 365. We didn't even stop for Christmas or things like that. It's not like retail. And retail is bad, but it wasn't like retail. It was 24/7. The only time that I think we actually shut anything down was during the day of 9/11. I think that was the only time we actually shut things down for a brief period of time. Or, of course, server updates or things like that. But when the servers are updates, everybody is there. So we're all standing there. But yeah, you literally live right next to the person for days and days and days.
Yeah. I mean, and there you go. That's how those relationships are getting built. That's how those bonds are being made. You're a part of those people that you're working with. That's really awesome. It's sad, you and I have talked outside of this, and it's sad to hear as time goes by that more and more the reconnection with some of these people is around the passing of people, unfortunately, who've been involved. And it's sad. I've been doing a lot of research on this stuff and seeing people's lives grow and evolve. And then, I was recently looking at a lot of Keith Richardson's stuff and going through a lot of his art. And
you mean Keith Parkinson?
Keith Parkinson, sorry. Yes, Keith Parkinson. So going through
the other one, I don't
know. Going through Keith's
he was
art,
a wonderful man.
The process. I was actually looking at the evolution of the box art and the inclusiveness of the characters and the changing of characters, the changing of art style, because since with EverQuest, since about roughly Lost Dungeons of Norath, they've had different artists do almost every single box since then.
Well, but Jeff, because Keith Parkinson went to Sigil.
Yes, right. Well, and that's
so he exited EverQuest when Jeff did,
right,
and went over to Sigil.
And that's it's a noticeable difference. It's because he really brought, like, you can see the soul in every single painting
Yes.
every single image. And I do feel as though, and this is just my opinion, not anything you need to comment on even, but it's some of that soul lost with that. Like you could see that
Oh, sure.
transition over to like Vanguard and the art that came along that he did specifically for Vanguard. It's just it's a whole different quality. It's a whole different experience when you're looking in there and you're breaking down like the little bits and the little
Yeah.
details that
Well,
he added to everything.
I will say when we had Sigil Games Online, we were fortunate enough to work with Keith full time, and we had almost every available wall space covered with his art. Why wouldn't we, right?
Yep.
Most of it was his original art, and it was well cared for and well respected. But it was even looking at things that he did with in his Dungeons and Dragons days and his early artwork and his early
Oh,
covers that you could just see so much of Keith in everything that he did. I mean, the Firiona V is just an absolute masterpiece. And to then actually run across the girl that was almost identical to Firiona V, that just is like karma, I mean, it's just
yeah.
like it's the way it's
Surreal.
gonna be. And she was amazing. And the two of them together to watch him see her is like his dream girl come alive. And you can just see the glow when he sees her motions and her movement. And especially was when she was in full costume, just watching how he captured her in a painting over and over and over again. I mean, he did much more than just the box art of her. Looking at all of those, he was an amazing individual. We lost him far too early.
Yeah. It's sad. Very
It is
sad.
very sad. Yeah, far too early we lost him.
And with him, there was Brad, obviously, which has been, geez, what are we, 6, 7 years now?
Uh 2019?
Yeah, I don't
No,
remember what
November
it was.
November
November.
2019.
Yeah, so you're 6.5 years roughly, and you were involved. It sounds like with his celebration of life, and maybe you had spoken to him before he passed.
I did speak to him before he passed, and I did arrange all of his celebration of life, much to the dismay of some family members and things like that. I did all of the we picked all of the people that were just talking. I think we had 6 or 8 people talk at the celebration of life. Um, it's not the last big get together that we had, but it was the first in a very long time. Um, Brad and I, again, like when he picks up the phone and calls you or called me, it was usually, hey, I got a specific question for you. Need to know so and so. What do you remember about such and such? Or tax issues that he couldn't figure out, or just like a variety of, hey, do you remember this GM's name? I can't remember it, or things along those lines. He and uh, I, he and I got together just a little bit before he passed away. He and I shared several things, unfortunately, through our lives. Both of my father and his father had dementia.
Ooh,
And
I hear that.
my father was a veteran. I think his father was as well. Um, his mother was still alive at the time, but he was trying to figure out what to do and how to deal with it and how to maneuver through a lot of that process, you know? Um, so he and I talked a lot about that. We talked a lot about Pantheon at the time. Um, sorry, it makes my voice queasy.
No, it's okay. Definitely get it.
We talked a lot about Pantheon. They were in beta at the time. We probably spent, I don't know, about 3 hours together. He picked Olive Garden to go to of all places, but we met at Olive Garden. So it was good to see him. He he seemed like he was back in some of the throes of his addiction issues, which,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a beast that is just very difficult to control. And I think his wife was very, very sick, who we also talked about. Rachel was very sick. Um, the doctors had given her like less than 6 months to live. And that was Rachel was his one and only love ever. And losing her, I think, the thought of losing her and his father was very, very difficult for Brad. So tried to talk him through some of it. I had already lost my mom at the time, but I tried to help him understand how you move on with some of it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it seems like the help didn't work or help, but is what it is, right? I can
Yeah.
try. That's all you can do, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, addiction is a terrible thing, and it grips, unfortunately, more people than most people can even quantify. It's very
Yeah.
unfortunate, and to be put in such a stressful situation where you're facing down, your wife potentially passing, losing a father. I mean, it's just, yeah. It, I think
Well, it may not be well known. It's probably not well known, but Rachel didn't come to the ceremony because she was in ICU. She passed away within a week of Brad leaving. So they pretty much they
didn't
were
know
buried
that.
together.
Oh wow.
So yeah, his daughter lost both of her parents within a week of each other. So
I didn't even think about that. There's a
yeah,
daughter.
so
How old would she be now?
uh well, she was just in college then. So
Oh,
well, let's see. 2011, September 2011 was 9/11, right? So 2011, she was 2 or 3. So she was born in maybe 2008. We all went to Germany, which is why I'm like tracking backwards for
I
her
see.
age.
Yep.
She was like 2 or 3 maybe. So she probably was born in like 2008-ish.
Okay.
So she's,
Yep.
that's rough idea of her age.
Roughly the same age as my daughter.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like I know it's a weird track to go back, but that's how my memory works.
yeah, no,
So,
I
it's like pick
appreciate
a
that.
date and time of when I know something was a fact and
Yep.
reverse
Trace it
engineer
back.
backwards and forwards.
Yeah, no, that's
Strange
good.
thinking process, maybe.
You know what? I bet you that's the exact same thinking process you had to use for EQOA, right?
It is.
Like we have this benchmark. We know this historical thing happened in game on this day. Let's go back now. It's 100
Yep.
years, 200 years. Yeah. That's
Yep.
great. That's great.
But anyway, so yes, I saw Brad. Uh, what happened is very sad. There's just nothing you can do about it. We all have to move on with it. Um, our industry is not a kind industry either. The games industry is a very, very difficult industry. It's never there's never any security in the industry, in your job or your lifestyle or where you're living or if you're going to be here or in Canada or in Germany next year. There's just it's very unstable, and so
And getting
it can
worse.
be it can be ground shaking for people. And
Yeah.
yes, getting much worse.
Yeah, I've been doing a bit of research in that area as well, and seeing, the banks don't want to give money to those types of projects anymore.
Yeah.
Obviously, AI coming in and being maybe used in some ways that it wasn't necessarily intended for, but also being relied upon to replace people. There's a lot of different dynamics involved. Not to mention the AAA market in gaming is kind of imploding a little bit.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, the whole thing. A lot of people losing their jobs, and a lot of people kind of going on to do other things. There was a big push for people joining the gaming industry, and now it seems like a lot of those people who went to school and got educations for that have, they're out as accountants and doing various
Yeah.
other jobs and things now, you know?
Well, the other thing too, with at least with our starting in the industry, those of us that are actually veteran, there were no schools. I mean, there was art school, but there wasn't game school for design. There were programmers, but not game programmers. And we built our own engines. So it's not like you could have learned it in school. You know, you may have learned programming some, but it's not like you could go to school for anything we did.
Yeah.
And there had only been one game before us, and they weren't sharing a whole lot of information.
Yeah.
And so we were the ones creating the rules and the policies and figuring it out and going, oh wait, we need to be able to talk to people. We need them to know that we're a GM. Oh wait, we may need to see their inventory. Oh wait, we may need to change their name. I mean, when we launched, we couldn't change names. Well, customer service couldn't.
Yeah, you want to talk a little bit about that? Like basically the inception of getting into the creation of this sort of cutting edge thing, and then maybe talk a little bit about those systems and what that meant or how that played out.
Sure. So I guess probably the easiest, I guess I'll start at about EverQuest beta, which is early early 99. It was in beta a little bit before pre-beta. It went from 16 to 32, from 8 to 16 to 32 to 60, blah blah blah. But we'll start like at EverQuest beta, January, February, March of 99. Um, we launched in March of 99. So at the time when I started, Jeff became the customer service manager. He moved out in January of 99. I moved out in March of 99, packed up all of our stuff, and we brought 5 guys, I think, initially with us, from Clearwater, Florida. We'll start with that, or Tampa, Florida. We'll start with that. So I had all of their guys' stuff in this truck that we drove from Florida here. So we had piled everybody's stuff in and moved it all at once. They all came out in automobiles. And we just loaded up the truck at our house and moved everybody's personal stuff, whatever they were bringing, and drove it out here. I got here in early March 1st of 99. And at the time, we had a beta server and a test server. The test server remained the test server, but the beta server became Fen and Row, our first server. And so everybody that was in test or beta and all of the guilds and all of that information, all of those people were moved to a live server, which what became Fen and Row, of which I was the GM for. So all of the people, including all of the employees that we had, which weren't many, we were all on Fen and Row. And we launched with 13 servers. Fennon was the obvious, it was considered the big one because it was also the good old boy network
Right. Yeah.
of players.
Cool kids hang out there.
So all the cool, that's where all the cool kids were. And little did we know how many cool kids we actually had at the time, but we can get into that later. That became Fen and Row, and then we had the other servers. So immediately we had to start hiring customer service people. And we were like, well, we'll call them GMs, game masters, because I mean, we all came from Dungeons and Dragons Zero, right? So we'll call them game masters. And so we started a group of game masters, and we didn't really want to use our real names because it's a fantasy world. You want to keep fantasy. So you have to come up with your GM name. Can't use something that's been, don't want to be Darth Vader or 50 other
Right.
things. Most everybody wanted to do Lord of the Rings. Yeah, no. Later that becomes prominent, but anyway, so we were careful about the names that we picked. Everybody had their own. We kept everybody's aliases so people didn't know who we were in real life. They couldn't immediately tie us together, which became more and more important because we dealt with death threats and all kinds of crazy things throughout the years. So everybody had their GM name, and then they had their email address, and then we had their real name. And very rarely did we, in fact, we didn't publish it until, I want to say 15 years later, who was actually who. like formally. Most of that, we then set up tiers. We had GMs, lead GMs. I was the head GM. Well, Jeff started the head GM, and then I became the head GM. And people like Bill Coyle has always kept his name out there. Bill and I are on the back of the EQOA box as Elionia and Solist. So if you turn it over, you'll see our team on the back of the box.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so as you know, I still stick with my game name as Elionia. So any professional job anywhere that I go, I am Elionia. Which became interesting when we left, more so for Brad, because Brad was Eridoon. When we departed ways with Sony Online Entertainment, they kept trying to say our names were their property. And we were like, no, that's my identity, not your identity. And they'll be like, well,
Ooh.
things like you're on the back of the cover with that name. And so we actually had a bit of a scuffle between legal and everybody else to go, yeah, no, those are our GM names and we're going to keep them. It's like our profiled identity, much like YouTubers and influencers now, that's your
Our
name.
brand. Yeah.
But then we didn't know we were creating a brand. I mean, you pick it. I actually hated Elionia for a long time, but you kind of pick it, and it was like, didn't know it was going to stick with me for 35 years. I might have picked something different. But anyways, so we all picked our names. The different servers, as they grew within about the first month or so, different players were flocking to different types of servers. Povar was very role play ish and very quest ish leaning people. So the GM that we put on that server was very quest centric forward, that type of personality. Furiona V, later when Furiona V server came up, it was all role play. Nothing in that server. It was very role play and set up very role play. Then the PvP servers. We all know PvPers. They're usually, love them. They're usually fairly aggressive in their gameplay. They like killing other players. They're designed to do that. They're fast on their feet. So the GM had to be very hard-nosed and no BS and a lot of brass. So as the servers came live, we'd have to figure out who's going to handle what server. And Fen and Row was always the key, because also most anybody that really was anybody was playing on Fen and Row. All kinds of people that you hear, Ozzy Osbourne, RJ Tolkien, not Tolkien. Let's see, who else? Anyways, though this is fairly long. R.A. Salvatore, Keith, Parkinson, Brad McQuaid, John Smedley, all of our lawyers, a lot of the Sony corporate, the World of Warcraft development team, almost all of them, and so Ralph Koster, Rich Vogel, I mean, you go through the whole list, and we were like, we got to start tracking these people. You can actually go pick up a video somewhere. I just heard it not too long ago of Zach Carlson, Ozuri, discussing him changing a name. I'll let you guys go listen to the story, but him changing the name of an individual. And that is like a funny type of story, but it led us to the point of, hey, we need to be able to make notes on people's accounts, because back in that time frame, we couldn't share the owner of the account information with anyone, because it was considered restricted information, just like credit cards.
Right.
So the GMs couldn't see who they were talking to in real life, but then we'd have a death threat, or we'd have somebody's house being broken into, and it'd be like, we need to call the cops. How do we find out who this person is? Well, we had to create lead GMs. Lead GMs could see all that information. And so when we would come through and change someone's name or leave someone's name because they were entitled to it, because they're creator of that IP, then we need other GMs would see a flag this is a lead GM only account. Please discuss with your lead before interacting with this player. And things
Okay.
along those lines to begin going, I don't want 50 people to go change the same guy's name, because every GM who sees him should technically inquire about changing his name or her name. So we would go through all of those kinds of things. Back then, gold farming was really big. So trying to keep up with gold farmers and ban them constantly. Selling items on eBay was also a constant chase thing.
Know
And I
anybody
had
that did that?
I had a team of 5 guys that were investigated all of those things. And they were our security team. And they would investigate anybody, including me, for any issues that we had. So as time grew, our tools had to grow, our logs had to grow, because GMs could make gold bars. And we actually had a GM hand out gold bars. That's a whole nother story. It's called the Keymaster story. But in going through things like that, we had to give ourselves all the tools and build them all. Well, now when somebody sets up a game, they're like, oh, these are all the avatars. You need to be able to be in God mode. You need to have that. You need to be able to talk. You need to be able to silence people. You need to be able to go to people. You need to be able to summon people. We had to create all those things. We had to come up with them and then create them, because it didn't happen. It wasn't a routine. It's like driving a car now.
Right.
It's like going from manning a horse to driving a car. Well, we created the car, and now we got to build the car to be able to drive the car, and now we need blinkers, and now we need lights, and
How are we going to steer this thing? Yeah.
it was a huge process. How do you not hit the next person? How do you see behind you? And those are all the things that we did with EverQuest, as well as trying to entertain at several points hundreds of thousands, well, more than 100,000 people at the same time, and keep them entertained with live servers and live quests and live GMs and Christmas. And Christmas isn't, will it invade in the immersion of the world? Well, that's Christmas. We're going to have Christmas, guys. That's just the way it is. And then they were like, well, if it's Christmas, does that lead to religion and religious connotations? Brad was very no angels and demons. Everybody knows that about him. Christmas could be associated with angels, so we won't call it Christmas. We'll call it Santa Klug, who is actually Steve Klug. We'll call it Santa Klug and change the name of Christmas, and et cetera, et cetera. So years and years.
It's
That's a bit of
crazy.
rambling, but that's
No,
some of.
it really is interesting, because you don't think about, you don't think about the fact that, especially in the early days, the amount of people who, first of all, you had the famous people who were playing and the developers, which I have a whole thing about that. I don't know is that in current day as many developers play their own games. Like, I think
I
we've
agree with you.
reached a point where, like, a lot of the people who are actually making the games don't even play their own games,
Yes,
which you touched
and
on.
that could
And
be a quick downfall.
yeah, it puts you out of touch with not
You
only what's
have you
going
have to
on,
have
but
your entire team playing your game.
yeah,
I mean that was mandatory with EQ and EQOA, and really with many of the Amazon games I was on. We had a play day where everyone logged in and played, and we would cross test. I would test Bill's zone, Bill would test Tom Wells's zone, Tom would do my zone, and those were all requirements. Now that's not as much true,
yeah.
but God, it should be.
I agree. I agree. I think that is how you're getting those brush strokes. You're talking about Keith. That's how you're getting that level of detail, because when you're in there and you're actually experiencing it, and there's that one corner where the monster can, like, see right around the edge,
Yeah.
so you have to approach it just right, otherwise you pull everything and everything goes wrong. Though you find out about those things by existing and living in the world and experiencing it just the way the players do. It's
Yes.
very unique. But you think about that, you've got these famous people who are playing the game. They're using, names that are related to certain IPs, their own IPs. They're being
Jim Lee,
involved in
great example.
yeah, right, yeah. Jim Lee deleting his character so he could, finish off some of the work that he has to do.
Yes.
That's a wild story. I recently went back through a lot of that stuff that I was looking at with Jeff when I did Jeff's interview, and hearing some of that stuff and hearing about how that kind of comes to be. Again, you guys had to create those tools, create those systems to be able to even do that in the first place because it wasn't a thing.
Yeah. We would all sit in a big room and at least, well, we had scheduled meetings, but keep in mind we were together a lot. But
Right.
even like in the scheduled meetings, everybody we had the wood elf, we had the barbarian, we had each person had different specialties within the game. We had Jeffrey Zatkin, our mage, the master, the archmage of EverQuest, who did all of the magic, and we had our trade skill guy, and you'd have to go, okay, trade skill guy, barbarian, why are you two not able to do this in game? We'd have Roger Uzin, who was a programmer that insisted the world was his, and I'd go, Roger, my warrior corpses are disappearing on Fen and Row on this particular mountain. He'd go, no, they're not. And I'd go, follow me. And his corpse disappeared on him. And I was like, see, I told you, you don't know everything about your world. And he's like, that's not possible. I was like, well, I agree. It shouldn't be possible, but it's your world. Go fix it. But things like that, and he'd be like, there's no way that's not possible. And I'd be like, oh, well, here it is. Everybody's, point in time, everybody was running around as skeletons. Another point in time, everybody had lollipops, those big circle lollipops for somebody that used an improper. At one point, the guides wound up with a spell that as soon as they tried to talk to somebody, it would kill them.
Oh. No.
But yeah, so there was all kinds of,
Man.
It was amazing. We were trailblazers. It was flying by the seat of your pants. It was a hell of a lot of fun, but it was flying by the seat of your pants, and we didn't do everything 100% right, but when we didn't, we learned quickly, or tried to anyways.
Well, and that's just it. It comes down to trying. You actually put the effort in to try and do those things and try and
Yeah.
develop them, and you found what worked and what didn't. It happens.
Well, that's what gets you into the world of, the Guinness Book of World Records.
Fair.
We made it.
What did you get put in there for?
I think the first one was for the most number of players online.
Largest number of
simultaneously.
Players on? Yep.
Yeah.
I did the short where you guys broke the internet.
Basically. Oh yeah, that was launch day.
Yeah. Wild.
The internet
story.
between here and Los Angeles literally stopped.
Yeah.
And we're like, oddly enough, one of the times we learned from this, but San Diego Gas and Electric does random power downs for certain circuits for repairs and things like that. Well, they kind of forgot to tell us that they were doing that. And we went totally dark. All the servers, all the buildings, all the computers, everybody. And we were locked in the building because the security doors closed. And so we got one door open by our security guard who had the only master key. He came over, opened the door, and I sent all of my GMs to go home and work from home because they had power and we didn't. It was like, as soon as we get home, everybody's going to need power because we got the chat server back up almost immediately. But yeah, then it was like, okay, now we're going to need flashlights in the building and we're going to need a generator. so there were things like that we trial and error is how you learn things.
Can you give an example of like one of the most memorable, maybe uplifting moments and maybe one of the most frustrating moments that you had?
Launch of beta to launch day. You could literally feel the floor shake in the building. We were second floor. You could literally feel the anticipation in the air and the floors shake with anticipation of how it was going to go, what was going to happen, how many people were we going to be successful, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Launch beta night, which was everybody logged on and everybody, we had a blast. We had all the gods on, all the GMs were able to be gods. We had big events going on almost the whole night. We could kill everybody that we wanted to, which was not something you normally did. That was probably my favorite night. Probably my least favorite was the shutdown of EQOA. When EQOA sunset, that was like a stab in the heart. And Sony didn't want to do it either. There's a whole story behind that. You can go read the whole story. It's like a 3-hour interview. But it came down to the 3-digit code on the back of a credit card, which the Sony PlayStation 2 at the time didn't have it anywhere in its formatting or syncing to be able to input that 3-digit code. And that was the only way Sony Online Entertainment could bill a credit card. And we couldn't get the number at the time. It was illegal to ask for the number, for customer service to ask for that number. If you remember back then, that was a secret number, like your PIN. You didn't give it to anybody.
Yep, different time.
We weren't allowed to ask for it, and we had no way to bill people. So EQOA, and we tried to I talked to Ryan Elam, I talked to Amanda Poe, I talked to all of our programmers, Kevin McPherson, about what is the way around this. And there just wasn't one. So we had to sunset the game, which really sucked. Still sucks.
What a wild story. Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, you figure you have something so amazing like EQOA, and it's as simple as the 3-digit number on the back of the card that nobody just had the forethought to, okay, this thing connects to that thing. Because I guarantee you guys weren't the only ones who dealt with that issue. But it's, wow.
And for a long time, people were blaming it on Sony and that Sony didn't want to support it and on and on. That's not true.
Oh, yeah.
Smed and Russ had me go chase down for like 3 months to try and either port it to the PS3 or find a back end to the PS2 so that we could keep the game alive. Because even Russ's wife played, Russell Shanks I'm talking about, Russ's wife played and loved EQOA. She's one of my best beta testers. But there was nothing we could do. Our hands were just totally tied and there was no way around it. At least not a financially reasonable way around it.
Right.
I mean, if you had thrown millions and millions of dollars at it, maybe, but it just wasn't worth it.
Right. You never recoup
from that standpoint,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Wow.
So yeah, that was crazy.
Were you around for like what is it, Champions of Norath or
Yes.
Lords of Norath? I that was another.
No, Lords was after me.
Okay.
Champions was Todd Carson, and they were in the other building. A bunch of the smaller games at the time, it was considered a smaller game. That Tanarus. There were a couple others going on. The ones that were out of Austin, out of Tucson, actually. Those were all managed by separate building.
Okay.
But yes, I was around for them. Todd Carson was a GM of mine that I had hired for. The GMs kind of went spread out throughout. We had about 400-ish GMs come through customer service under me. And then we would kind of spread out. So like, we'll take Star Wars Galaxies. I'll make an example. Star Wars Galaxies, when it was all in, they were proposing staffing for Star Wars Galaxies. They needed to set up the development team. And you probably know with EverQuest, we had a program where you would apprentice with EverQuest. If you were a customer service GM, you could apprentice for 10 hours, was free, but you would apprentice for 10 hours a week with the dev team and begin to learn whether it's art or programming or design, or a lot of them picked design, some picked programming, not many. But on that apprentice program is how you actually got into the actual open positions as GM or as design positions came open. So we weren't hiring from open pool onto the live team. It was pretty much you got promoted onto the live team because we knew where you came from, we knew what your work ethic would be, et cetera, et cetera. So customer service was the stomping ground to get into any other division into the company, basically. When SWIG, Star Wars Galaxies, started ramping up, that group came to me and they were like, okay, who are your 10 best GMs? I want those to be our starting of our development team, our customer service team, our QA group. And we're going to start moving people to come create this game. Give me your 10 best. And I did that frequently. Free Realms, Star Wars Galaxies, and Swig I helped with myself. But that is how nowadays you'll see so many people from that time frame. Probably half of the GMs are still in the industry that came through EverQuest under me. Probably half. Many of them, well, not many. Some of them have made it to like senior vice president kinds of positions into various companies. And it's always fun to run across somebody and find out, they're off doing so and so, and they're senior vice president and director of 400 people or all those kinds of things. It's fun. It kind of makes me feel like a mom to everybody,
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have a particular person that you would shout out? Not to put you on the spot or anything, but is there a particular person that you're like really proud of, or where they came to and where they started?
Zach Carlson, Akil Hooper, Harvey Burgess, Lawrence Poe, Amanda Tarr, James Hansen. The list
Those are
goes
some,
on. Jason
yeah.
Polk.
Oh yeah, some big names.
Well, Ralph Coster, but of course he didn't come through me. Yeah, I mean, you can go down the list. That's probably, I know I'm missing a couple. Sorry, guys. Sharon Morris. I'm super thrilled with what she's not in the industry anymore, but she's doing animal rescue, which is fun. Ryan Elam he went over and he's now retired. He absolutely fascinating career. Let's see. Those are the couple that come to mind.
Sure. It's really interesting. I do think from a philosophical and sort of a fundamental standpoint, when you look at how you guys brought people up, there wasn't school. People weren't coming through and being like, I have 4-year education in this, and here I am. I'm ready to program and I'm ready to build this thing. Didn't exist. So you guys had to, not had to, but you guys did develop a system in which you trained people from within. You built sort of your experience within the business. And as I start to think about that, that's really a almost a better system than I think what we've landed on, because you are
Yeah.
learning that work ethic. You are learning the intricacies from experience and kind of knowledge, as opposed to, here, read this book and it tells you how to put these things together to create this other thing.
Well, generally my process, and I interviewed all of them. I was the go yes, no for the majority of the time. What we would do was we had a guide program, as everybody I think is familiar with, and we had apprentice guides, senior guides, and elder guides. None of the elder guides were in a position to want to work directly at the company, although they came to all the fanfares and things like that. But senior guides and guides, Sharon Morris, one of the ladies that I just said, Zach Carlson, I got from the guide program. Many, almost, I won't say 100%, but I'd say probably 90% of the GMs that I hired were players in the game that then showed an interest to join the program, the guide program. They would go through apprenticeship for, I want to say it was at least 30 days. And then after apprenticeship, they would be promoted to guide. Then they would be guide on not their play server. That was a requirement. You couldn't guide on your play server. But then they would be assigned to a server. PvP was separate, but you would be assigned to a server. And then for periods of time, I didn't really ever advertise jobs. I would, broadcast in the channel. We're looking for GMs. Send your application resume too. And I had a email box, and I had binders full of resumes, people that sent us our resumes. And we would go through the yes, no's, but they had all been players. So we already knew, or I could watch them in game and see how they were dealing with other people in their guild, or, or conversations, or GM warnings, or, in some of their cases, they were part of a really bad guild and wound up banned. Well, why did you get banned? In the case of PvP, is that to my advantage that you got banned? That I banned you, and can I use that to my advantage as a GM? And the answer was yes. Hence Relazek. And so we go through that whole process. But when it actually finally came to interview, it was usually at FanFares. When it finally came to interview, it would be 15 or 20 minutes. I'd make up my mind. I'd have the guy's lady or gentleman's resume, mostly gentlemen, but I'd have the resume, and I'd be, okay, here's 10 questions. Furiona V, who is she? Al-Kabor, who is he? And I'd go through 4 or 5 different historical questions. Tell me about XYZ Guild. Tell me about the Mystical Order. Tell me about Brad McQuaid, or, 20 things. And if they didn't know enough about EverQuest to pass the 20 question test, I didn't need them. Had a whole binder full. And literally in some of the interviews that I did, it would literally be the guy waited for 4 hours to see me. I spent 15 minutes with him. Ian Conway, he drove like 4 hours to come interview. It was pouring rain. He waited all day to interview with me because Microsoft showed up. I interviewed the guy for like 15 minutes, walked out the door. I was like, we'll be in touch, walked out the door, called the GM that was with him and said, I'm hiring him, get him out here, hung up the phone, and I didn't talk to the guy again until he was on site. That was literally how the whole hiring process went. I had a couple, I won't say their names, but I had a married couple that both were really young, I think 18, 19, if maybe 20, threw everything that they owned in their car and drove cross country and showed up at our doorstep to work. And and they wound up at security, and security called their lead GM from their server. Their lead GM called me. I was like, well, I guess they've driven all this way. I will interview them. We wound up hiring them both, and they both still are in the industry. But there was like the one-offs of things like that, but we also fired a lot of people. There was a list of 10 commandments. It was posted on the walls. If you cross one of these 10 commandments, no question if and or but or who you are, anybody in the company, developers, designers, lead GMs, attorneys, don't care who you are. If you cross any of these 10 commandments, you're out of here. And we had many of them.
I was going to say, maybe this is a good time to touch on that Keymaster story.
Oh, God. Yeah. Jeff and Zach actually tell it better Jeff tells it better than I do. Zach wasn't there. Bill Coyle was there in the room with us. So it was early on in EverQuest, and GMs could make gold bars, and they could create the gold bars, but they were also tradable at the time, unfortunately. And we had a GM that he was on tech support, and the tech support manager begged me to take him over as a customer service GM. And we were like, okay, I'll give him a shot. I had an opening. I didn't, it was early on. He already knew, he was already on site. I said, okay, I'll give him a shot. And so Bill Coyle was his lead GM, and lead GMs frequently snooped our own GMs to make sure that they were paying attention to all the rules and making, it was customer service checking in on your CS reps. And Bill had discovered that this guy had created platinum bars and given them to this player. And then that player sold them and pocketed cash. And the GM, we had them discussing it. The GM owed this guy, who was his ex-roommate, the GM owed the guy money. So he took the gold bars. I think it was either gold or platinum. I don't remember. It must have been gold. Took the gold bars and created them and handed them to his ex-roommate, who sold them for the money that he owed him, which is rule number one. And so whenever we got all the lead GMs together in Jeff's office, it was well known shit was going down. Something's wrong, something's going down. Jeff would walk into his office, leads, I need you. We would all go into his office. I think there were 6 of us, maybe 8 of us at the time, probably 8 of us at the time. And Bill had all the transcripts. We read all the transcripts. We pulled up the guy's inventory. We all confirmed that what he was saying was true. We banned the roommate and called the GM in. And we were like, here's the logs. Here's your roommate. Here's the money that he sold on eBay. What are you going to do? And he lost it. Began crying and wailing and on and on. I won't get into the bloody, gory details, but it did turn bloody gory. Jeff had a whiteboard in his office, and it's got that tray on it where you put the pens, which has sharp corners. One of those sharp corners wound up in the back of the guy's head. So he was like bleeding. He was pounding his head against the wall, threw his keys, which whiffed past Bill Coyle, literally whiffed past him. Bill had to dodge them. We're talking like a 10 by 12 room, 8 by 12 room, maybe. We got the guy his keys back and said, if you don't quit it, we're going to have to call the police on you. We're going to have you escorted out. So time to settle down. His girlfriend was outside. You're going to have to settle down. This isn't negotiable. If you walk out of here in handcuffs, you're not going to be able to get another job in this industry. So we suggest you back down and calm down. He took his key, put his key in between his hand and started stabbing himself in the chest, beating himself, going, I don't care if I can't work here. My parents are going to kill me, etc. And on and on and on and on. So he called the cops and had to have him escorted out. And hence that is the Keymaster story. And yes, I have that key. But it is, oddly enough, that Keymaster story wound up being used in other games with a Keymaster quest and a couple other things like that. So it's kind of a legacy story. That was, and it wasn't the only GM that we had escorted out in handcuffs, but it was the most memorable.
That is wild.
And that's short. This whole process was like an hour and a half meeting or something to that, to that point. But I shortened it really to not get graphic. But yeah, so that's the Keymaster story.
My God, I can't even fathom. Jeff had told the story about the RAM being stolen from one of the servers.
Yeah.
While testing City of Mist. And,
yep.
It's wild. You don't think about it because there's like a whole layer of goings on that happens behind the scenes. I think Jeff also
oddly enough,
touched on
that guy's roommate was in charge of our internal security. And we called him in, and I sent him home to go assist the police grab the RAM from under the kitchen sink, I guess it was bathroom sink, which he knew where obviously he knew where it was. So while I've got the GM on site with the police, my security guy is over there getting the RAM out of which happened to be his sink because he lived with him. But yeah, that's another story too.
It's just
that was
such
a good one.
It's such a wild thing because you don't think about that stuff. You don't really like stop. And there's a story, and I don't know if you want to get into this one. I don't know if you're attached to this one, but there was a story about the balancing of rangers and how they may or may not have been adjusted a little bit or nerfed a little bit as a result of some feelings one way or another.
Yeah. That one I don't know as much about because that was developer to developer.
Okay. Yeah.
So that would be a Jeff story.
It's just interesting because you don't lot of people don't think about the fact that there's these kind of going on, there's relationships behind the scenes. It can impact the way the game happens, the way the game is played, the way, City of Mist almost doesn't happen. Rangers have nerfed stats,
Yep.
and these things affect the actual development. Again, while all of this is going on, you guys are developing the systems in order for these things to even exist and work and operate. It's just wild. It's
Yeah, it
crazy.
is. Trying to think a couple of other interesting stories. Um, well, I guess I can get into this one. So you heard me talk about logs that we had, and I think still to this day, it's not really well known what logs all of us had access to. Um, the developers had access to some logs. I had access to more logs because I was the head GM. And then lead GMs had access to some logs that, but a little less than I did. And then GMs down, and then apprentices, et cetera, et cetera. So they're called avatar levels. So the avatar levels and the logs, and then we have the whole guide program. Like only certain people could see real names or things along those lines. So one of the guys that built the back end that tapped into the logs, because this is, remember, everything was band-aid then. This wasn't planned, so it was band-aid in for me to be able to see somebody creating something or who created it, and trade logs, and all of those kinds of things. The game wasn't initially programmed for us to do those things. The simple go to and hide and things like that were programmed in. All of the logs we had to parse for a very long time. And it'd be like, guys, I have to have this log. You've got to be able to tell me. I've got to be able to follow this sword from player A to player B to player C to player D. And I've got to be able to link it up without going through a stack of paper. Literally like this, sometimes we would go through stacks of paper to track stuff. And our GMs get a phone call on customer service, which there was only one phone. We get a call on customer service. And the guy says, look, I bought a sword on eBay, and I'm sitting on the server waiting for the guy to deliver it to me, and he's not delivered it yet. Can you find out where your GM is? And the person who answered the phone knew enough to go, sure, hold on, let me go find out. So they got a lead GM on the phone, and we discovered that one of the employees, who was a GM, but also in charge of all of our logs, was creating all of the items and then modifying the logs to remove what he had done so that he could sell items on eBay, and we couldn't see it because he knew how to modify the logs because he was creating them. Caught him red-handed. And so when we called him into the office, we were like, yeah, your eBay customer is sitting there waiting for you. Let's just say he's not going to get his item, and you'll be hearing from the law firms. You'll hear from the lawyers. See you later. I don't think they prosecuted him, but I do think we did some kind of financial settlement with that guy. But yeah,
Jeez.
that was talking about the fox guard and the chicken coop.
Yeah. There was a very
and it was
similar
like,
story.
I think it was like a total sales of like $30,000, which was a lot of money. I mean, these guys were making $9 and $10 an hour, so it was windfall. But really, you're gonna jeopardize your whole career. I mean, some of us have had 30-year careers. You just jeopardized over, a $500 gold bar, or a $300 sword.
Lord,
Really?
yeah.
But anyways, that's another one.
That's crazy. Yeah. My Lord. You talked about FanFare and meeting a lot of people at different
Oh
FanFare
yes.
events and doing interviews and things at FanFare events. That's not really something that exists anymore. And as someone who has worked at not one, not, you've had multiple different studios that you've worked with, multiple different businesses that you've worked with. Why do you think that it's kind of we've kind of gone away from that? Now you have the more large conventions that are sort of everyone
Well, I'll
from
give a
all vendors go there.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll give a call out to BlizzCon because they do still do that.
Yes. Yep.
So that's quite cool. Our FanFare should have been BlizzCons. They should have been. But so when Sony corporate became more involved, and Sony corporate integrated some Sony management into Sony Online Entertainment. When that happened, it became more of a marketing company than an actual game company. They were more interested.
Transition, yeah.
They were more interested in doing everything for all of the Sony brand more than just EverQuest. And we were interested when we were doing it. I mean, they even moved away from having server GMs. Why? I have no idea. I was against it, which is why one of the reasons I left being customer service manager, because they wanted to modernize all of it and put it, through chats and all of that. GMs never even logged into servers and still don't. We had quest programs and quest volunteers running daily quests and all of that. That's the DM version and Dungeons and Dragons version of our insight for EverQuest and what made EverQuest. It was all about the players. For the players, it was all about the GMs and all about the developers, not about marketing. When Jeff and I were there, Jeff pretty much had the entire live side. I pretty much had the whole back-end customer service side and support side of EverQuest. And so we had like 90% of the company, not legal and HR and that guy kind of thing under us. But between us, we had the majority of the company under us. And it was all about the players. Everything was for the players. Because if you don't have the players, you don't have a game. You don't have a company. At $9.95 a month, or depending through the years it changed, or $9.99 a month, $9.89. If you don't have the players, then you don't have a game. And it's about the community. And I mean, now games have community moderators that are more like what we think a GM should have been, but it's all influencers, and they're going to go play the game for X amount of time. Whereas a GM lives in the game. They see what's happening day to day. And they wanted to move us away from that. And I completely disagreed with it, because you also lose your community and you lose the immersion. You have peanut butter and jelly walking around, that's just not immersive. What are you going to do? So I think probably they don't do that now, because now it's more about money and corporate. Whereas with us, it was about the player and the money came. When you create it, they will come. That was more our philosophy. Instead of how many can we get to come, it was do it right and they'll come.
Yeah. If I turn this just a little bit, I can draw more people in. And so that was the new focus, as opposed to, hey, if we just make a really great thing, people will want to be here. Yeah.
And you can see that through the last 2 or 3 SOE fanfares. They even changed the name to SOE Live. Fanfare, obviously, fair for the fans, right? All the GMs show up. They're rock stars. The players love them. Some players hate some of the guys. It was the good cop, bad cop. But it was all about the players. And they did make money. I won't say that they made a lot of money, but they made the community. I know people to this day that met their wife and I just say wife because it's an actual couple. He met his wife in EverQuest, and we married them in EverQuest, and they're still married. We had some people name their child. There's a Nagathon and a Vox kids out there running around. Many times we did weddings, and every now and then I hear from those couples that got married in EverQuest and are still together. That doesn't come from just being corporate. That comes from a player atmosphere of building guilds, building trust, building friends. At the time, for some people, that was their only link to the real world. I remember a situation where we had a gentleman that I want to say he was quadriplegic, but at least he was paraplegic, that contacted us. He actually came to a FanFare one time. And it was his only way to actually be free and run was in game, because he couldn't run in real life. And he couldn't speak in real life. So he could do all of that in our game. That was his life. And he could make friends. But he was closed into his real life home. So it was his whole world. And when you hear stories like that from people of something that you've created or helped create and helped made possible, there's just no greater reward that I know of, you know?
That's
So
really creating the magic. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. And I actually wonder why I don't have a marketing background, but I've researched and read and looked at a lot of different paths, and I have a huge history in human behavior. And I will say that it kind of blows my mind that more companies don't see the value in that. And we've gotten to this point where like more people are like, how do I make $1 today instead of making $1 every day for the next 2 years?
yeah,
And you can still be monetarily focused, but also breed a community, build up a population of people who love and just admire what you're doing, and who
yep,
are getting to be able to experience the world through playing it that can't do that in real life. There's a huge benefit to that. There's a huge,
yeah,
thing that we just don't see in a lot of games that are created today. I actually can't think of a game that's been created in recent history. I mean, Pragmata has obviously got like a big kind of spiritual and emotional feeling.
yeah.
Baldur's Gate 3 maybe.
But it was true of more games back then. I mean, look at the Final Fantasies.
Yeah. Yep.
All of them, right?
Yeah.
Look at Star Wars Galaxies. We had the same thing
Yep.
with Galaxies. Um, World of Warcraft was very good at it for years. Admittedly, I haven't played WoW in several years. Well, since probably 5 years or so. Um, but it was true of more of the online games. It was an online community. Now it's like, you got 10 people in your guild, and those are the only people that you talk to, and those are the only people you need, you know, excluding WoW, because I realize with WoW that's not the case. But it's lost some of that magic,
Yeah.
you know. Um, it'd be nice if somebody could find it again. And I'm hoping we've got some games coming up that can. We've got some great up and comers, as you and I both know.
Oh yeah. Yep. I will be excited to see what happens. Lot of opportunities, and hopefully it strikes iron.
Yeah, there's more than several studios. I can name of 5 or 6 now that are open or managed or run by some of our original group people. And not that you had to be part of the original group, but you had to get it. And there are a number of studios out there, just here in San Diego, of people that are trying to redo it again. We tried at Amazon, but again, there's corporate, and if corporate takes too big of a interest, we'll put it that way. If they take too big of an interest, then the veterans can't soar to the skies. You have to let them soar. You have to let us do what we do.
Yep.
And if you're going to restrict that, then you're the only the only thing that you're doing is costing your own company money.
Why do you hire them in the first place? Yeah.
I had a conversation at Amazon at one point, from a gentleman named Mike Frazzini, who was high in Amazon Games at the time, and asked, why are they having such a hard time finding girls to interview? He asked me, we were doing a big round table with the whole studio. He's like, why are you like, I look around and there's 2 girls here. Why? And I said, well, Amazon Games requires 5+ years experience to get into. And while that's great, and this was 6 years ago, you're requiring, 5 years to get into, which means you're really limiting yourself as to your group, because if you look back 10-ish years and you want a veteran, you're not getting a veteran, because even like with me, in my whole department, there were like 4 girls.
Right.
So you can't get a female with 30 years experience. We don't exist. There's 5 of us, And he was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, that's, there's, you can't create a pipe that didn't exist. And
Right.
back then, I would hire women, but they weren't playing games like they are now.
Yeah. Vastly
So
different environment.
I really, when you think about it, all due respect to women, but when you really think about it, 90% of all of the GMs that are really, really successful are all men. It's a men's industry. It's unfortunate, but it is the way that it is. And that's the way it was born. D&D was born and played predominantly by young boys and men. And that's just the way that the industry has been. You can't change, you can try and change it, but nowadays, the more influencers and people like that are getting, this generation is getting more into it. But my generation, they weren't playing games.
Yeah. I mean, as a person who's involved in Twitch and YouTube and things, I'll say I find that if you leave people to their own devices to make decisions to where they want to go, if I click on Tomodachi Life, I see woman content creator after woman content creator after woman content creator,
Right.
whereas I don't see many men in that space. And I can
Right.
certainly imagine the same would exist of Dungeons and Dragons, or
Yeah.
that's evolved over time, obviously. But I think if we look back to the 2000s, the 1900s, as the kids like to say these days, it was less
I mean,
so.
a prime example, look at Stranger Things.
Oh yeah,
Prime example. They clearly give the nod to the fact that not many women played.
right.
And it's just nothing you can do about it. Is just the way that it is.
Reality, yeah.
But it takes me back to the fact that I'm proud of all of the GMs and developers as well. Most of them started as GMs, save a couple. But I'm proud of all the things that they were able to do. Some of them had never had a job before. I hired, can't tell you how many people from GameStop, you know, or
Right.
from the local Magic the Gathering store. The clerk from the local Magic the Gathering store I hired.
You have
There's
unique
just things like
perspective
that,
there. You have unique perspective in the fact that, I mean, you guys, and I don't know if you want to talk about that, but you came from owning a gaming store, right?
Yes.
And you and the group of people that you drove across country to start your sort of career really was a bunch of people from a gaming store hanging out,
Yeah.
playing there, or otherwise.
So I'll go back to the Clearwater, the Tampa store. I lived in Clearwater prior to opening the stores, which were opened in Tampa. So that's the reason I get Clearwater and Tampa confused, because it was a drive for a while. The Tampa store, I actually opened my store in Oldsmar, Florida, and it was a collectibles game store. I didn't do comics because at the time it was a very expensive business to get into. Collectible toys, which is something that I collected Star Wars toys from, the what was kind of 77 Star Wars toys and Star Trek toys. Star Trek was much older. And so I was familiar with all of those things. So needless to say, I'd gotten divorced from my first husband and decided, what am I going to do? Well, I know toys, I know collectibles, I enjoy them. I'll do that. So I opened a collectible store, and Jeff walked into my store at one point. I was up on the ladder. I remember it clearly. I was up on the ladder, and he said, "Can I talk to the owner, please?" And I turned around and I was like, "Well, sure, you are." He's like, "No, no, like I've got, like, I really need to talk to the expert around here." I said, "Okay, what can I help you with?" He said, "I'm looking for Mego Star Trek figures. Do you have any?" And I said, "Well, the only Migos I have are Batman and Robin, but my distributor in Orlando, I know, has the full Mego set. I will take you up there and show you the full Mego set." Those at the time were $300 to $400 a toy per toy, and there were like 12. Which, so I didn't keep them in stock, but I had availability to them if you know. So our first date was me driving him up to that store to look at those Mego figures. Um, that was our first date. But so that's where I met Jeff. And um, soon after that, I want to say a couple months. I think we dated for 3 or 4 or 5 months, something like that. Soon after that, he wanted to add comics to the store. He was a comic book collector. I was like, "Sure, you manage it? Absolutely, we can do that." So we set up a section of the store side. And then soon after that, we decided to there was a comic book store that went up for sale. Well, a comic book area that we could move a store to and create a 9 to 5, well, a retail store location, full retail out of Oldsmar. So we moved over there and opened that store. And the guy, let's see, 2 of the guys, the north, we wound up with 2 stores, a north store and a south store. Both managers of the stores, 2 of our best customers, myself and Jeff, started the EverQuest customer service team. The collectible store, we had a cyber cafe inside the store that was supported by a gentleman named Ryan Elam, also known as Gebron in the EverQuest world, a very predominant programmer in the EverQuest world. He was also the second or third guide in the guide program. He was also from Tampa, Florida, who, when we truly needed a programmer, he moved out here to California and is still here. The last big gathering we had was for his retirement. But Ryan set up a Duke Nukem group in our cyber cafe and levels and everything. One of our customers actually went to the Duke Nukem company and got a job working on Duke Nukem. And several of the other people that we later crossed paths with at Sony Online Entertainment knew us from our Bourbon Street store. Bourbon Street was also then predominantly became a Magic the Gathering store and a D&D TSR store, gaming store. We moved away from collectible toys, stayed in the Hot Wheels Redline market, but we moved a little bit more away from Hot Wheels toys or from collectible toys and moved into Magic the Gathering and became a high profile Magic the Gathering store. The closest one to us was Orlando. So we were drawing people from everywhere to come play in our tournaments. And I'd have like a Juzam de Jin tournament and like 65 people show up for the tournament in this little 900 square foot store. I wound up becoming a WotC judge. At the time it was Duelist. I wound up becoming a Duelist judge so we could hold sanctioned tournaments, of which one of the gentlemen that came with us, his name is Kelsey McNair. Kelsey came with us and was one of the first, I think, 11 people in customer service, had all of his stuff on our truck. When Kelsey left EverQuest, I think he was on EverQuest too. When Kelsey left EverQuest, he then went and opened a brewery here in San Diego and is doing very successful with his breweries, North Park Pubs. So we can follow all of these people on all of. I've known Kelsey since he was 13 years old, and so when you run across people, so oddly enough, what goes around is like when Pixel Mage jumping forward, Pixel Mage 2016. We had Pixel Mage's launch party with John Smedley. I held it at Kelsey's North Park Brewery. So we held our, so we always try and use everybody back to each other, but that's a roundabout story. But the gaming store, that's what happened. We took our North store manager, our South store manager, and started into EverQuest. So those guys I had known, I think I've known Bill since he was 16 years old. And then the twins are Tom and Eugene Wells. I think I want to say the twins were 17 or 18, barely. We drove they drove Bill Coyle's car out here to get here for early January, right after the new year, to begin opening, and left me behind for 2 months to pack everybody's stuff. So I stayed back for 2 months to pack everybody's stuff to bring us all out here. And then we all lived in one house. We rented one house and all slept in the one house for, I couldn't tell you how many months.
That's wild.
I told you I talk a lot, so I prepared you.
No, hey, that's good. This is great stuff. I mean, there's so much of this stuff that just doesn't get shared, that goes unknown. And you and I have talked in the past about, to some extent, you really kind of being the glue that kind of connects people at some shape, some level, some dynamic. And I think that that's important. I think that so many people miss that. I think it's one of the things that's missing from gaming today. I think it's one of the things that's missing from a lot of the communities that are, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's the newest, MMO or the newest FPS game. The communities are what make those things happen. They're what make them blow up. Burnt Peanut is a really good example of how the Arc Raiders community just exploded everywhere. This content creator steps in and develops these sort of cinematic scenes with other content creators where they're building armies and fighting each other and they're bonding over these experiences. That's not even something that's built into the game. It's entirely the community creating this thing. And I don't need to say user generated content around you, not with Jeff around, but it is a really, really interesting thing that exists within those communities. And I think that you being able to speak to how that stuff started, but how it was involved in the development of EverQuest, of EQOA, and all these other games, it's important. It's huge. And I think that that's where the success comes from. It's one of the reasons.
Well, I was one of the constants in all of these pictures. I was at Sony, although there was brief breaks for layoffs, but I was at Sony from 99 until 2013. So I was there for 14 years. Through all of these projects and all of these groups, I had the brief time of Sigil in between, but all the Sigil people were basically almost all Sony people anyways. I mean, we went from one project to the next, and we still do. Many of the Sony people became the Amazon people, the Amazon Game Studios people. So I'm kind of the constant. So when somebody wants to figure out what somebody's, who's talking to who, it's like I just talked about the coworker that passed away. I got the message from the family of, hey, where do we put this? And so I posted on my Facebook group, which is Gamers for Gamers, which is all internal people. All, people from John Smedley to, Ralph Coster to all the senior execs and all of that are all, because I know them all. And then, we have an internal LinkedIn for ex-Sony and an ex-AGS now. So I'm kind of the one constant, which is why, going back to Brad, when it came to Brad's services, his family was never into games, nor did they ever play. And of course, Rachel was an ICU. And his best friend was Mike Butler, no relation, but Mike Butler was his best friend from high school. And so, Mike contacted me, and Angela, his wife, contacted me to say, hey, we want to do something like this. You're the one kind of connected to everybody, and you have the website that we can put it on, which is Gamers for Gamers. Can you help us put this together? Well, that's what I do for a living. It's what I've been doing for Amazon Game Studios. It's what I did for FanFare. I've been doing this for forever. And so I went to the office and I talked to John Smedley, and I was like, hey, I think I want to do this. Are you cool with that? Considering I'm Amazon Games, it's going to take me a little bit of time, but are you cool with, me making public posts and that kind of thing? And so I wanted to clear with him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, no problem, let's do that." And so Smed talked, Russell Shanks talked, Ryan Elam talked, Brad's daughter talked, Mike Butler talked, a couple other people. Bill Fisher also spoke. And it was one of the first time we had been together. All of us had been together probably in, I want to say 5 years, if not 10. And we had more than 100 people show up. I had really tight security there too. And it's things that go into planning, like the room that we were in had an exit door at the front and on the side, and then everybody came in the back. It was a long hallway. And I put the stage in the front, and I put Brad's family on the right-hand side of the room, with it in front of literally in front of the door that was there. And one of the family representatives, won't say names, came over and said, "Why did you put them over in the corner instead of in the front?" And I said, "Well, let me be clear. There's an exit door right there. The table in the center is where security with the guns are, and people are coming in the back. So somebody comes in the back to threaten somebody. Brad's family is the first people out of here through that door, with the people with the guns sitting in between them." And they were like, "Oh, we hadn't thought about that." I said, "That's why I do this." you know, Brad had enemies, player enemies and enemies. That's why when you plan something out, it's not like hosting a birthday party.
Yeah, right.
Which I do those also, but it's not like hosting a birthday party. You have to be, some players are very adamant about their feelings, due from all the death threats that we've had through the years. But when you plan things out, you have to consider all of those things, which is why I do those things. And I've got another one, unfortunately, with Chris Hatch coming up. His services are coming out the end of the month. But we do the good and the bad. We did Ryan Elam's retirement party, and there were about 100 of us there, which is fun. Getting everybody together, and we're like, wow, how many presidents and vice presidents do we have in this meeting today? All in the same room.
A lot of money in the room, yeah.
Yeah, but it also goes to show you just how successful people in our industry can be. We've had lots of people crash and burn, either through their own demise or through doing something stupid or greed or 50 other things. But for those of us that are still around and still kicking, it can be lucrative.
Oh, and you can do it
both emotionally and financially.
Oh yeah. The fact that you guys are all still connected is huge. I talk to Sean Lord every now and again, and I always joke with him. So when are you guys getting the band back together? Like it's interesting because there are so many people that are connected, and you have, now you have Monsters and Memories, you have Pantheon, you have all these projects out there that are being built by these people, and to some extent you see the influence of that original like EverQuest kind of like seeping into the project, and it's awesome. And there's a lot of communication that happens behind the scenes as well, like when they run into different issues, problems, whatever it is, they lean on each other. And I don't think there's a lot of that outside of that era of people, right? Like in modern business, you don't see a lot of people reaching out to the guy that works at the competitor being like, "Hey man, we're having this problem. Is there a way that we can navigate this?"
Yeah. Well, like when Matthew Smith is the name his publisher name. But when he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want to interview you. I'm doing a book on EverQuest. Who do you contact? Who do you still have contact with?" A conversation you and I just recently had. Who do you still have contact with? Who do you think would be willing to talk to me? And how do we contact them? Well, I pick up the phone and call them. It's just the way that it works. There's very few people that I wouldn't pick up the phone and call. Some of the ones I fired, but other than that, but truly, I still run across people. I had somebody I don't remember who it was, but I was just reading a Facebook post of somebody that was wearing an EverQuest shirt. We all have swag, right? Somebody was wearing their EverQuest shirt when they went grocery shopping a couple days ago, and the person that was cashing them out said, "You have an EverQuest shirt. That's an old shirt." And um, she was like, "Yeah, it is. It's an old shirt. Did you work there?" "Why, yeah, I did." "Well, I played on Povar." "Well, I was your GM." That's how the conversation literally went.
That's awesome.
Um, and and that was, well, let's see, that would have been 2002. She was there, so 24 years ago. You know,
Wow.
um, but there were when we were in the industry heavily into EverQuest, we couldn't wear our shirts outside of or rarely any swag. At least somebody stop us, unless we intended to, like Comic Cons
Right.
and Dragon Cons and things like that. Wearing them to Dragon Con. That's how we met Gary Gygax. Um, you know, you couldn't hop on a plane unless we were, if one of us was going to wear a shirt, then we had the entire group wear our shirts, like when we were going to fan fairs or things like that. But we always traveled in groups. We always had to travel with security. um, it was fun. We were rock stars, but it was also somewhat dangerous, but I run across that less now. More people just like recognizing me by name or something to that effect, but more people like stumble across me on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on something like that. Which is also, like, as you know, I have 2 Discord channels. I have 3 Facebook channels. My phone is whitelist for those reasons, but it's just, you can't. Many of us talk about getting together, like you said, getting the band back together and that type of thing. And we've talked about 25th anniversary. We talked about, Michelle, are you going to hold a fanfare for our 25th anniversary? Was considering doing it, and I broke my hand. And I was like, yeah. I broke it and had actual multiple surgeries on my hand, and
Ooh.
almost lost complete use of my right hand for a while. I was like, there's no way I can attempt to do any of this when I don't have a hand. Um, but it's, yeah, getting the whole band back together, everybody would be thrilled. It's just a matter of, airline tickets are expensive right now. We've gotten together. We've done the EQOA team did a couple of interviews for that group, where we got 5 or 6 guys involved with Jeremiah Johnson. But it, you know, would we
Tough.
love to? I think everybody would love to, but real life happens.
Everybody's at different phases. Everybody's got something going on. Yep. Yeah, it
Yep.
happens. It happens. Um, are you playing any games today? Like, is there some game out there that you're actively into?
I still log into Lost Ark,
Okay.
which was an Amazon game. Um, Recently, I haven't been playing a whole lot of games. Um, Prior to that, I was playing all of our Amazon games, um, and Fallout, of course. Um, More so
76.
recently, yeah. Um, Most recently, right now, I have been going through and trying to, because I'm not working right now, knock on wood. Actually going through and trying to organize our collectibles, like our EverQuest collectibles, and the quantity of swag that we have, and get it somewhat organized. Um, Trying to narrow down some of the storage units and put all of the EverQuest in one same room. you know, well, I
From
should
what
say
I've
all of the gaming in one room, um, which is, and all of my collectible toys from, generations and generations before I was born, from the stuff from the store. With Bourbon Street, we didn't do a closeout sale. With Bourbon Street, we packed it all and shipped it with us. I brought it with us
Whoa.
on that truck, and it's all in the closets. I got stuff from Warhammer 25 years old. My magic cards are 25 years old.
Holy
So
smokes.
I've been going through, and we've come to the realization that we need to, I do have some insurance, but it's probably underinsured. We've come to the realization that it's time to begin figuring out EverQuest. Are we going to put it in a museum? Are we ever get? I couldn't afford a house big enough to display all the stuff that I have. I have the sign that was on the building. The Sony Online Entertainment sign. I have the sign that was on the building. I have the sigil sign the variant sign. I have the sigil sign. I have Keith Parkinson artwork. I've every T-shirt that we ever made for EverQuest, every employee shirt, and in multiples because we were employees. I'd have 5 of the same shirt because if we go to FanFare, you don't want to wear the same shirt every day.
Right.
EverQuest, EverQuest 2, Swig, collected a lot of WoW stuff, so I've been spending a lot of time cleaning out the closets, quite literally cleaning out the closets.
Gosh. Yeah,
and
I know
just trying to get stuff organized while I have time.
Jeff would talk about, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got one of those laying around, or I've got that laying around, talking about the comic books and talking about,
Oh yes.
all the various different things. Good golly, you probably have some like priceless EverQuest Next stuff and landmark stuff and
Yes.
my lord, can't
And Keith
even.
Parkinson originals,
Yeah.
Jim Lee original. That's probably the top end for
So,
EverQuest related stuff. That's
yeah,
probably the top end stuff. But like I said, the sign on the building, there's only one, and I have it.
that's awesome.
Planet Side leather jackets that was Russell Shanks. I have every cup. We did variant watches. I have variant shot glasses. I have EverQuest shot glasses. I have Furiona V shot glasses. Just everything that we ever made. I have all of the action figures, multiple ones. Raul Partha did Keith Parkinson EverQuest figures. I have all of them. The list just goes. And doesn't even include the written paperwork
Oh
that
yeah.
I have of drafts of all of the artists and all of those kinds of things. We have all the sigil paperwork, all the sigil art. That was back when artists actually did things on paper first. Not to include computer hard drives. God, there's got to be 50 computer hard drives upstairs.
You're going to
Just
need an archivist to go through and like literally.
that's me. I don't know if you look at eBay for Keith Parkinson work anymore, but there's
I have.
Parkinson posters from EverQuest up there that are all signed and numbered. Anything below 100 was an employee. Well, I have a role, you know.
Oh.
Keith and I went. Keith, his wife Donna Parkinson, and Jeff and I went to see a movie. God forbid, I don't remember what movie, but we went to see a movie at Islands Restaurant, and we were all sitting around. Keith was a fan of cats, as you know. I have many cats. And he had been over to my house. He's been over to our house multiple times, but we got to talking about something on cats. And he was, the bar mats that they put your drinks on. He started drawing one of our cats, and he's just like doodling while we're talking because he doodles, right? He's like doodling away a cat, and I was like, Keith, will you sign this? He's like, he's like, it's a doodle. I was like, Keith, sign it. You're Keith Parkinson. And he's like, sure. So he signed it, and he drew me 3 more. So I have a set of 4 that he drew of my cats, and it just like, how do you value any of those things?
You
The
don't.
t-shirts are plentiful. I mean, I think there's five bins at probably 30 a bin. So there's like 150 shirts between EverQuest and Sigil, which I've now all carefully packed up and put into a container and labeled. But it's like the one Vanguard leather jacket that was made as a sample for Jeff. It's the only one that exists.
Ooh.
And I created all the swag for Amazon Game Studios. So I have all those samples and everything that I created in the 9 years I was there. So, you just go through, and it's like, an archivist isn't going to know these things, which is one of
No.
the issues that we're approaching, in that we need to start having these things identified and figure out, I'm either going to need like a 10,000 square foot house or some other plan. So that's kind of the process Jeff and I are at, which is what I'm doing right now.
Have you run across, or do you know, like, what your favorite piece of memorabilia or favorite
Oh, that's
souvenir?
easy. That's easy. Keith Parkinson's Furionavi. It's the
Yeah.
cover of the TV guide.
Yep.
Um,
The
that's clearly my favorite.
big painting. Jeff took a picture, and actually I used it in
Yeah,
one of my shorts. Yeah, that's beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful.
That's my beautiful. That's my favorite. Um, by far. I mean, just because there's so many ties to it.
Yeah.
And because it was done by Keith. You know, I mean, it would be just as valuable to me if Keith were no one, because he was a friend. You know what
He
I
was.
mean?
Yeah.
So it happens to be very valuable, but it is more valuable to me from sentiment of watching him and having drawn it and put it together and worked with Denise Harris
Yeah.
Farianavi, and worked with Denise during that whole process. That's my favorite by far. That's my favorite.
That's really
The
awesome.
rarest is probably the signs on the building. Well, Keith's painting is probably rare too, but
Yeah.
the rarest is probably, or one of a kinds are the signs on the building. Um, and then I think probably a lot of the hand drawn artwork through the times, through the days of a lot of the pen artwork, pencil artwork from the artists. Um, but the fun things to go through are like all of the pictures on my hard drives. You know, like I'll be back looking for something. I'll go like, oh yeah, that's fanfare from such and such in my photos. You know,
Yeah.
I think I've got something like 200,000 photos or something on all of my drives. And it'd be like, oh, that was Star Wars Galaxy's launch night. You know, it's got all of us all of us under the green umbrellas because it was almost raining that night. We were all at launch night. That was a hell of a fun night. But that we were all early on. It's a picture that we've all shared amongst ourselves.
Was Jeff wearing the slave Leia costume in that photo? Just ask.
No, no, but we did have a girl that could.
Oh.
But yeah, um, that's probably some of my favorite. The favorite
That's
times,
awesome.
I think, the most enjoyable. Not, and I don't mean that working on the dev teams and everything wasn't enjoyable, but it was also a lot of hard work. The enjoyable, fun time was at a fanfare, kicking back with the players, telling stories amongst the group of 8 of us sitting at a table, all of us sitting there talking and sharing like a Keymaster story, which we didn't share when we were employed at the
Right.
time. But sharing fun stories of something that we would do. Or, you know, somebody would ask a question about such and such a Nathaniel Mars last big quest, or, you know, something along those lines. Sitting back and doing the chatting part of it and the person to person involvement of everybody, engaging everybody at the table and having someone across the table be fascinated by it, I think was probably the fun parts. You know, it was like I had a blast interviewing with Matt Smith for his book and reading through it when it was done with you. I have fun talking about this stuff. Only so many people want to hear it, I think. But going through and just like reliving some of it, it's who made me who I am today. And every single person along the way made me who I am, you know, and wouldn't change any of it. You pull one little string and then you have, you know, if I hadn't come out here to San Diego to do this, would I still have Bourbon Street sitting in Tampa, Florida? Would I have done any of the things that I have done? You know, I still play Magic and I still go to Magic stores. I still collect Magic, but you know, would I still be a level 4 WotC judge judging tournaments? Maybe. I have friends over at WotC now. Um, so it's hard to, you know, it just, looking back on all of it is just kind of a history. But it's fun that people are interested in hearing about it.
Absolutely. There's tons of people. And I'll say, even just here talking with you, it's been really magical. Like, just you can see and you can feel the emotion and how passionate you are about it. You can see as you're talking about the stories with the players and doing all of the, you know, just hanging out and just talking about it. You can see the passion, you can see the love for it, and I think that that's important. I think that that's vital, and I think that that's what me and my channel, that's what I want to share. I want to share the love, the desire to play the games, build the games, make the stories with the people around us, create the community. And that's something that in my talks with you, I have seen above all else. Community is up here. I'm trying to get the
Yep.
top of my camera here, but
Yep.
yeah, it is, and that's awesome. It's just vital. And I hope that moving forward in the world, we see more of that and there's more experiences like that.
Well, I think
I'm
it's what's required to be successful. And I think if I it may not be true with this day and age and this group of millennial of people that are here playing buying games now, but if you want to attract people 30, 40, 50 years old that are nostalgic, um I mean, look at the PlayStation 2 games that were around us, all the crash games and Chrono Trigger and you know eh, Might and Magic, and you can go through it list all of those things out. That's what is magical. Those are the things. It's kind of something that I look at Disney as a whole, not the corporate Disney, but the intellectual property world of Disney. That's what they built, and they're still building it. That's what J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter built. We'll see whether they're continuing it. At the time, that's what Star Wars was when we were representing it. It's what Marvel was when we were representing it. Um, if you don't have that and that passion about what you're doing and enjoying every day of it, why the hell are you doing it? You're doing something wrong. Because if every day in work isn't fun, then your success is meaning it's just money. You know, relationships, people, feelings, support, family. That's what it's all about.
That's absolutely, yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. And frankly, what a great way to actually come to the end here as we approach the 2 hour mark. Um,
Sure.
I got to tell you, this has been awesome. Way more awesome than I could have expected, and I really appreciate you taking the
Oh,
time
awesome.
and
Sure.
sharing these stories with us. And frankly, I bet you we could line up another 2 hours if you were up for it sometime in the future.
Happy to.
But now I'm being
We can drag in
selfish.
somebody else too if you want.
Hey, that would be great. I think it would be great to see not only the interactions, but hear the different perspectives and the different stories. So yeah, absolutely,
Sure.
absolutely.
Absolutely. Happy
Thank
to do it.
thank you so much. I really do
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
everything that you do also. There's you're doing a little unsung here, but thank you for everything that you're doing too, because with people like you bringing influence and bringing passion and bringing it to the front, maybe it'll drag more people along with us. At
I
least
appreciate
that's my
that.
hope.
Well, we can see. Here's hoping.
Absolutely.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Let me know. Happy to meet with you again anytime.
Will do.
Thanks for the
Thank
opportunity.
you.